Good morning. A big pleasure for me to be here. Also for me, the first time in Vilnius and the first time in Lithuania. I have been asked to speak to you about global trade trends and the future of transport and logistics. Now, I am not a transport and logistics expert, so I'm above all here to explain to you why we at the OECD, and in particular in my directorate, are more and more interested in what you are doing. My name is Marion Jansen. I'm the director of the Trade and Agriculture Directorate at the OECD. For those of you who do not know the OECD, we are an international organization with 38 members. We are based in Paris, and our 38 members consider themselves to be like-minded countries. It's not always entirely clear what like-minded means, but it definitely means that all our members are democracies, all our members have market-led economies and believe in open markets, and that's important for what I'm going to discuss. We are based in Paris, as I said, and we host at our premises also the International Transport Forum, so if you visit Paris to come to the ITF, make sure you knock at my door and also speak to me. Now, what has been happening in trade trends in the last years? I see a lot of people in this room that are younger than I am. Maybe you find it normal to see a lot of change, to be exposed to shocks. I have in 25 years of careers never seen the level of frequency of shocks and the level of depth of shocks as I've been seeing and have been witnessing in the past years. And this has definitely had a huge impact on my job, and I wouldn't be surprised if it has an important impact on the job that you are doing in the logistics and transport sector. Have a look at this slide. I invite you to look at the left side above all. Here you see the kind of swings we have been witnessing as a result of COVID in recent years. Huge drop in international trade in 2020, huge pickup again in 2021. The travel services, for instance, collapsed completely. A lot of trade got stopped, but also we saw a total change in structure of trade with everything related to tourism, transport, for instance, anything related to planes, train systems not being traded anymore, many things related to making things cozy in your home being traded more. We saw also huge shifts in where did production pick up first, from where goods traveled, with China starting to produce earlier after the COVID crisis, starting to send stuff, notably to the United States. The US was consuming but was not producing, so containers were going full from China to the United States and had to come empty back, leading to major disruptions in your way of functioning. We expect trade to continue to grow in 24, 25 again. 23 has been a very weak year for international trade, but overall we are not very optimistic about how vivid and how dynamic the international trade landscape will be. What you see here are moderate growth figures. They reflect above all that we consider that there will be a lot of uncertainty in international markets. Some uncertainty comes from the fact that policymakers are talking about things like nearshoring, reshoring, reflecting that there is a concern about supply chains having been too long, things being produced too far away, and therefore there is this exposure to shocks making our economies vulnerable because it makes it more difficult to access things when we need them. So is there a trend therefore to start to produce closer to home or maybe at home? That's the kind of thing we analyze with these data at the OECD. These data show not trade, how much flows across borders, but they show which percentage of what we produce in a country requires imports. So this tells you something about the importance of supply chains. If I use a lot of imports, that means in order to produce my car in Germany, I'm German, in order to produce a Volkswagen, I need a lot of imports from somewhere else. So supply chains are important. What we see here is an important growth of supply chain trade in the 90s, in the early 2000s, and then whoop, great financial crisis happened. This was the first very important shock, where there was also a tsunami just before in Japan, but that shock really created a lot of, changed a bit the trust we had in the international trading system. In particular, led to a situation where China started to import less. So we see here a stabilization of supply chain trade. Not sure, these are predicted data from different data sets. What is going to happen in the future? We do not see a collapse of supply chain trade so far. Some experts expect supply chain trade will pick up great times. Also here, we want to emphasize above all that there's going to be uncertainty and change. Trade will continue to happen. I mentioned to you I'm responsible for agriculture. Trade will continue to take place, notably because for one of the most important things that we care about, being able to eat, this world will continue to need international trade. What we are seeing, have been seeing here, is steady evolution with certain regions of the world, notably Latin America, Brazil here, green, also Northern America, producing more food, more agricultural stuff than it is consuming, so strengthening its net export position with other parts of the world, there where the populations are growing, developed East Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, starting to produce more and more, but the production is not keeping up with population growth, so net imports are increasing. So in order to feed the world, and that's definitely an important global objective, trade will continue to be necessary, and therefore notably bulk type of trade, and we expect the direction of trade from the Americas towards the African and Asian region. So here, not a lot of shocks. Agriculture trade has gone through shocks, but a steady evolution. But we are seeing some bigger changes in other fields, notably in industrial trade, where we have seen tensions growing between the United States and China, notably the United States, you have heard about this, introducing tariffs on Chinese imports. And we have indeed seen that the imports, US imports from China have been decreasing until COVID, went up again and are decreasing again, and we are seeing the United States importing more and more from Mexico and Canada. So a bit of a nearshoring picture here for the United States. Modest, but a bit. More trading, more trade with already close partners, Mexico and Canada, and less with China. We do not see the same thing in Europe. Maybe it's starting, but Europe has continued to trade a lot with Asia, a lot increasingly with China. Look at this. And maybe it's changing now, but we have not seen yet this clear change that we are starting to see in the United States. We are not seeing it yet in the European Union. It is a space to watch. You have heard maybe in the press this new term, connector countries. Maybe what we are seeing is less direct imports from China to the United States, but that doesn't mean that there is less stuff produced in China being consumed in the United States. Maybe it just means that trade is deviated, for instance, through Mexico or through Vietnam, through Indonesia, for instance. What this here shows is how the imports of Mexico from China have increased and how the export of Mexico to the United States have increased. Same thing for Vietnam. Important increase of imports from China and exports to the United States. So a certain evidence of connector countries being active. This is the other way around. We see it is a bit less big. These bulbs with Indonesia playing a more important role. Important place to watch is Indonesia, is one of these potential connector countries. What we are seeing, however, is that the EU and the United States have reduced their foreign direct investment in Indonesia, whereas China has increased it. So, yes, a bit of nearshoring, maybe a bit of redirection. This would affect logistics and transports because you will have to travel through the connector countries in order to get to the United States. So I've mentioned we have witnessed these shocks like the COVID crisis. We are seeing geopolitics playing out in trade patterns. Another space that you have probably also been watching, that we are increasingly watching, is what is happening in important choke points, in particular in the maritime space. And the maritime space has been affected by, at the same time, by different types of shocks. You are all aware of the drought in the Panama Canal, so there's less possibility of travel there. We see these important choke points in the Asian region and anything related for traffic between Asia and the European Union. Important choke points here, and you are aware of military activity in the Black Sea region and also instability in the Red Sea region. So this is something that is very much affecting trade between Asia and the European Union. One thing we are seeing is that this is leading to changes in the modes of transport. For certain types of products, it is possible to deviate from maritime transport to rail transport between China and Europe. Thanks to the Belt and Road, we have seen the rail network being expanding, so it is possible to travel via land from China to the European Union. For certain products, it is important to change from maritime to rail. You may know better than I know that it's also possible for certain products to go to air. And when I heard in Abu Dhabi recently that Emirates is starting to, has also been active in sending tires from Asia via the Middle East to Europe. Tires is not the kind of thing I would expect to be transported via a plane, but this has been happening in recent years. We see that there's a very radical thinking happening when it comes to changes in the mode of transport, very much in reaction to what is happening in the world around us. Now, I mentioned big changes in how much we trade, what we trade. We have seen geopolitics affecting what is happening in trade. The climate change is affecting what is happening in trade. But we also see new types of regulations, notably in the European region, that are affecting what kind of paperwork you will have to be showing at the border, what kind of traceability you will have to guarantee. And here I'm thinking notably of environmental type of regulations, also regulations related to social sustainability. Does your product contain forced labor? How are you going to prove this at the border? What is the kind of information you will have to provide? There is a sense that there is an increased need for information at the border, for new types of information, and that this will also require increased collaboration among different types of agencies. Why am I saying this? We are used, for instance, for anybody who transports foodstuff, that you have to prove at the border that the food you transport is safe. We know, because this has been going on for decades, which agency has to provide you with a certificate of food safety. Well, it's less clear, it's not clear at all, which agency has to provide you with a certificate of the carbon footprint of the good that you are transporting. So we are watching, and this is an area where we are very active. This is called trade facilitation. We are helping the WTO to monitor how easy it is to get things through the border. And this term that is used here for the ease of border processes is the term trade facilitation. And we are, as you see here, the Baltic economies are very strong when it comes to trade facilitation. Other regions are weaker, but we expect above all that a lot of innovation needs to happen at the border in order to be able to deal with the requirements that we are currently expecting from international trade. And as some of you are having to bring things to the border, we would be very much interested in learning more. You see what is happening at borders, what the new requirements will be, and how rapidly we will have to ensure that change happens in border procedures. This was my last figure. I have explained to you, I've shown you how big the changes have been in recent years in international trade. You have heard already from previous speaker what this means for your job. There's a requirement for more agility, of making sure that trade remains resilient. The changes come from all kinds of sides. The changes come from geopolitics, from trying to change the competitive position of countries, so through political changes, through climate change. There They have come from pandemics, and what is expected from you and from us is to help our policymakers to make things continue to function at the border. When I started my career 25 years ago, I was told at the World Trade Organization, infrastructure, don't bother, transport, don't bother, that functions. We only look at policy making in the area of trade. Things have changed dramatically. Infrastructure matters, transport matters, what you are doing matters enormously. So when you come to Paris, come and see me and let's talk. Thank you.